The morning sun cast long shadows across the naval base as Sarah Martinez walked through the main gate for the first time. Her seat bag hung heavy on her shoulder, containing everything she owned that mattered. The weight felt familiar and comforting after months of carrying gear through impossible terrain during SEAL training. She had earned her place here, though she knew not everyone would see it that way. The base buzzed with activity as sailors moved between buildings, their uniforms crisp in the early light. Sarah noticed the stares as she passed. Some were curious, others skeptical. A few showed outright hostility. She kept her eyes forward and her pace steady. She had learned long ago that confidence was half the battle. Sarah's journey to this moment had been anything but ordinary. Growing up in a small town in Texas, she had always been different. While other girls played with dolls, she was climbing trees and building forts. Her father, a retired Army Ranger, had taught her to shoot when she was 8. By 12, she could outshoot most of his veteran friends at the local gun range. High school brought its own challenges. Sarah excelled at everything she tried, but her interests set her apart. She joined the wrestling team when they wouldn't let her play football. She took advanced physics while other students complained about basic math. Her guidance counselor suggested teaching or nursing as career options. Sarah smiled politely and filed her Navy applications the next day. The recruiter had been surprised when she walked into his office. Young women interested in combat roles were rare enough. Young women who met the physical standards were rarer still. When Sarah completed every fitness test he could throw at her, he started making phone calls to people with more experience in such matters. SEAL training had been the hardest thing Sarah ever experienced. The instructors pushed every candidate to their breaking point and beyond. They wanted to see who would quit when things got impossible. Sarah never quit. When other candidates struggled with the physical demands, she helped them improve. When the mental pressure mounted, she found ways to keep morale up without drawing unwanted attention from the instructors. The Hell Week had been legendary even by SEAL standards. Candidates were pushed through days of continuous training with almost no sleep. They carried boats over their heads until their arms shook. They swam in freezing water until hypothermia became a real threat. They crawled through mud while instructors screamed insults designed to break their spirit. Sarah remembered the moment when everything clicked. It was day 4 of Hell Week, and she was exhausted beyond anything she thought possible. Her team was struggling with a boat carry exercise, and the instructor was threatening to fail them all. Instead of complaining or giving up, Sarah found a way to redistribute the weight that made the carry possible. Her teammates looked at her with new respect after that. The academic portions of training had been easier for Sarah in some ways. She absorbed tactical information like a sponge and excelled at the technical aspects of modern warfare. Weapons systems, explosives, communications equipment, and navigation tools all made sense to her logical mind. The instructors began to notice that other students performed better when paired with her for training exercises. Combat training had revealed Sarah's natural talents. She moved through practice scenarios with an intuitive understanding of angles, timing, and positioning that couldn't be taught. Her marksmanship scores were consistently in the top percentile. During close quarters battle training, she demonstrated an ability to read situations and react faster than candidates who had been training for months longer. The psychological evaluations had been thorough and intense. Military psychologists wanted to understand what drove a young woman to pursue one of the most demanding careers in the armed forces. Sarah answered their questions honestly. She wanted to serve her country at the highest level possible. She wanted to be part of something bigger than herself. She wanted to use her abilities to make a difference in the world. When graduation day finally arrived, Sarah stood with her class of new SEALs knowing she had earned her place among them. The ceremony was attended by families, friends, and high-ranking military officials. Sarah's parents beamed with pride as she received her trident pin. Her father, the old ranger, had tears in his eyes as he shook her hand afterward. The assignment to this particular base had come with its own challenges. Sarah would be the first female SEAL assigned to this unit. The commanding officer had made it clear that she would receive no special treatment and would be expected to perform at the same level as every other operator. Sarah had assured him that was exactly what she wanted. Walking across the base that first morning, Sarah mentally prepared herself for what lay ahead. She knew there would be tests beyond the official ones. Some of her new teammates would need to see her capabilities before they accepted her. Others might never accept her regardless of what she proved. She was ready for both possibilities. The base itself was impressive. Modern training facilities sat alongside traditional military buildings. Sarah could see the confidence course in the distance, its obstacles designed to challenge even the most capable operators. The shooting ranges were state-of-the-art, with electronic targets and ballistic tracking systems. This was a place where elite warriors came to maintain their edge. Sarah's temporary housing assignment was in the bachelor officer quarters. Her room was small but functional, with everything she needed and nothing she didn't. She unpacked efficiently, hanging her uniforms with military precision and organizing her gear according to protocols learned during training. Every item had its place and purpose. The first meal in the base dining facility taught Sarah important lessons about her new environment. Conversations stopped when she entered. Groups of sailors looked in her direction, some openly, others pretending not to notice. Sarah selected her food and found a table where she could observe without being obvious about it. The base had its own social dynamics, she realized. Different groups sat in different sections. Officers maintained some distance from enlisted personnel, though the barriers seemed less rigid than in traditional Navy units. SEALs sat together regardless of rank, their shared experiences creating bonds that transcended normal military hierarchy. Sarah finished her meal and headed to the administrative building to complete her check-in process. The paperwork was routine, but the questions from personnel officers were more pointed than usual. They wanted to know about her training scores, her specializations, and her previous experience. Word of her arrival had clearly spread throughout the base. The medical check-in required a complete physical examination and review of her health records. The base medical officer was professional but thorough, asking detailed questions about injuries sustained during training and her current fitness level. Sarah answered honestly, knowing that any attempt to hide problems would only create issues later. Security clearance verification took most of the afternoon. Sarah's background had already been investigated thoroughly, but the base security office needed to confirm that all her clearances were current and appropriate for her new assignment. She waited patiently while they made phone calls and verified information in their computer systems. The final stop was the base armory, where Sarah would be issued her standard weapons and equipment. The armorer was a senior chief petty officer who had been on the base for nearly 2 decades. He looked at Sarah's paperwork with interest before selecting her gear with obvious care and expertise. "First time I've issued gear to a female SEAL," the chief said as he logged Sarah's equipment assignments. She reviewed the base regulations and organizational charts, wanting to understand the command structure and operational procedures. Sleep came easily despite the new environment. Sarah had learned to rest when opportunities presented themselves, a skill that would serve her well in her new assignment. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and new opportunities to prove herself worthy of the trust placed in her. The alarm woke her at 0530, giving her time for a morning workout before her scheduled meeting. The base fitness center was nearly empty at that early hour, allowing Sarah to complete her routine without drawing unwanted attention. She pushed through her usual regimen of strength training and cardio, maintaining the fitness standards that had carried her through SEAL training. After a quick shower and breakfast, Sarah made her way to Building 12. The third floor housed the offices of several SEAL team leaders, their doors bearing nameplate that indicated both rank and specialization. Sarah found the office she was looking for and knocked precisely at 0800. "Enter," came a voice from inside. Sarah opened the door and stepped into an office that reflected its occupant's personality and experience. The walls displayed certificates, photographs from deployments, and unit memorabilia collected over years of service. Behind the desk sat Lieutenant Commander James Morrison, a man whose reputation had preceded Sarah's arrival at the base. Morrison looked up from the paperwork spread across his desk and studied Sarah with experienced eyes. He was in his late 30s, with the weathered appearance of someone who had spent years in challenging environments. His uniform displayed the ribbons and insignia of multiple deployments and specialized training courses. "Petty Officer Martinez," Morrison said, gesturing to a chair in front of his desk. "I've been reading your file. Impressive training scores. Sarah sat down and waited for him to continue. She had learned that successful military conversations often involved more listening than talking. Your arrival here has created quite a stir, Morrison continued. Some people are curious to see how you'll perform. Others are skeptical that you belong here at all. A few are actively hoping you'll fail, so they can say they were right about women in combat roles. Sarah nodded. I understand, sir. I'm prepared to prove myself through my actions. Morrison leaned back in his chair. That's exactly what you'll need to do. This unit has a reputation for excellence that's been earned through years of successful operations. Every member of this team has proven themselves under pressure. You'll need to do the same. The lieutenant commander opened a folder and pulled out a training schedule. You'll start with orientation and assessment exercises. We need to evaluate your current capabilities and identify areas where you might need additional training. After that, you'll be integrated into one of our operational teams. Sarah reviewed the schedule Morrison handed her. It was comprehensive and demanding, covering everything from physical fitness assessments to advanced tactical scenarios. This was clearly designed to test every aspect of her abilities. Any questions about the training program? Morrison asked. No, sir. When do I start? Morrison smiled slightly. Right now? Report to the training facility. Chief Petty Officer Williams will be your primary instructor for the assessment phase. He's been briefed on your background and knows what standards to apply. Sarah stood and prepared to leave. Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't, Morrison replied. Dismissed. Walking across the base toward the training facility, Sarah felt a mixture of anticipation and determination. The real test was about to begin. Everything she had worked for, all the training and sacrifice, had led to this moment. She was ready to show everyone what she could do. The training facility hummed with activity as Sarah approached the main entrance. Through the windows, she could see sailors engaged in various exercises and drills. Some worked with weapons systems while others practiced hand-to-hand combat techniques. The sound of gunfire from the indoor ranges provided a constant background rhythm. Chief Petty Officer Williams was waiting for her in the main corridor. He was a compact man in his mid-40s with the kind of physical presence that spoke of decades in elite military units. His uniform was immaculate, but his hands showed the calluses and scars of someone who had spent years handling weapons and equipment in harsh conditions. Petty Officer Martinez, Williams said, extending his hand. I'm Chief Williams. I'll be overseeing your assessment and integration training. Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct gaze. Chief, I'm ready to get started. Williams led her through the facility, pointing out different training areas as they walked. We've got everything here. Combat simulation rooms, weapons ranges, physical conditioning areas, and tactical planning spaces. You'll become familiar with all of it over the next few weeks. They stopped at a classroom where several other sailors were seated around a conference table. Sarah recognized the setup from her training days. This would be where she received briefings and instructions for various exercises. First item on the agenda is a comprehensive fitness assessment, Williams explained. We need baseline measurements of your current capabilities. After that, we'll move on to weapons proficiency testing and tactical scenario exercises. The fitness assessment began immediately. Sarah changed into workout gear and reported to the conditioning area, where Williams had set up a series of stations designed to test different aspects of physical performance. The other sailors in her assessment group watched with obvious interest as she prepared to begin. The first station tested upper body strength through pull-ups and rope climbing. Sarah approached the pull-up bar with confidence, knowing her training scores had been exceptional in this area. She completed the maximum number required and then kept going, showing no signs of strain or fatigue. The watching sailors exchanged glances as she finished well above the standard. Rope climbing came next. Sarah scaled the 30-foot rope using proper technique, her movements smooth and efficient. At the top, she touched the marker and descended in a controlled manner that demonstrated both strength and skill. Williams made notes on his clipboard without comment. The cardiovascular endurance portion involved a timed run on an indoor track followed by swimming laps in the facility pool. Sarah maintained a steady pace that kept her well ahead of the minimum standards while showing she had reserves in case they were needed. Her swimming technique was flawless, cutting through the water with minimal splash or wasted motion. Flexibility and agility testing came after a brief rest period. Sarah moved through obstacle courses and stretching exercises that would have challenged many of her male counterparts. Her gymnastic background from high school served her well as she navigated balance beams and precision jumping requirements. The strength testing phase required Sarah to demonstrate her capabilities with various loads and equipment. She carried weighted packs over specified distances, moved heavy objects through obstacle courses, and showed her ability to handle the physical demands of real-world operations. Throughout it all, she maintained the kind of focused intensity that marked professional operators. Williams called a halt to the physical testing after 3 hours of continuous exercises. Sarah was tired but not exhausted, ready to continue if required. The chief studied his notes before addressing the group. Outstanding performance across all categories, Williams announced. Time to move on to weapons proficiency. The weapons range was Sarah's chance to demonstrate the marksmanship skills that had distinguished her during training. Williams started her with standard sidearms, setting up targets at various distances and requiring different shooting positions. Sarah's first shot group was tight enough to make Williams take notice. "Good start," he said. "Now let's see how you do under pressure." The pressure came in the form of time limits, multiple targets, and shooting while moving. Sarah adapted to each new requirement without difficulty, her shots remaining accurate even as the scenarios became more complex. When Williams introduced malfunctioning weapons and low-light conditions, her performance remained consistent. Rifle work came next, with targets placed at distances that would challenge even experienced marksmen. Sarah took her time with the first few shots, getting a feel for the weapon and environmental conditions. Once she had her zero confirmed, her shots began landing exactly where she intended them to go. The watching sailors had grown quiet as Sarah's performance continued to exceed expectations. These were experienced operators who understood the difference between good shooting and exceptional marksmanship. What they were witnessing fell clearly into the latter category. Williams introduced moving targets and rapid-fire exercises designed to test Sarah's ability to engage multiple threats quickly and accurately. She moved through the scenarios with a calmness that impressed even the chief, who had seen countless operators under similar conditions. "Enough for today," Williams finally called. "Report to Classroom 3 for tactical scenario briefing." The tactical scenarios were designed to test Sarah's ability to think under pressure and make decisions in complex situations. Williams presented her with a series of hypothetical missions, each requiring analysis of intelligence reports, mission planning, and tactical recommendations. Sarah approached each scenario methodically, asking relevant questions and considering multiple options before making her recommendations. Her solutions showed both tactical knowledge and the kind of creative thinking that distinguished exceptional operators from merely competent ones. The other sailors in the session began participating more actively as the scenarios continued. Sarah's approach to problem-solving encouraged discussion and collaboration rather than competition. Her willingness to consider other perspectives while maintaining confidence in her own analysis impressed Williams. Interesting approach to the hostage rescue scenario, Williams noted after Sarah had completed her presentation. "Most people focus on the direct assault option. Your flanking maneuver would probably work better in a real situation." Sarah nodded. "The direct approach has higher risk and lower probability of success. Sometimes the longer path is actually faster when you factor in mission failure rates." Williams made more notes on his ever-present clipboard. The assessment was clearly going well, though Sarah knew better than to become overconfident. Real acceptance would come only through consistent performance over time. The afternoon brought combat simulation exercises in specially designed training rooms. Sarah faced opponents armed with training weapons in scenarios that replicated real-world combat situations. The rooms were equipped with sensors that tracked every movement and impact, providing immediate feedback on performance. Sarah's first opponent was a sailor with several years of combat experience. The scenario involved clearing a room with multiple potential threats. Sarah approached the exercise with tactical patience, using cover and angles to her advantage rather than relying on speed alone. The engagement ended with Sarah successfully neutralizing the threat while avoiding injury herself. Williams reviewed the sensor data with obvious interest, pointing out particularly effective techniques Sarah had employed. Good use of concealment, he noted. Most people try to rush these scenarios. You took the time to gather information before acting. Subsequent scenarios increased in complexity, involving multiple opponents, time pressure, and equipment malfunctions. Sarah adapted to each new challenge, showing the mental flexibility that allowed her to succeed when plans didn't survive contact with reality. By late afternoon, Sarah had completed most of the assessment requirements. Williams called a halt to the exercises and led her back to the classroom for debriefing. Outstanding performance across all areas, Williams began. Your physical fitness scores are in the top 5% of all operators we've tested. Marksmanship is exceptional. Tactical thinking is sound and creative. Combat skills are well above average. Sarah listened without comment, waiting for the inevitable, but that often followed positive evaluations. However, Williams continued, real integration isn't about test scores. It's about how you perform as part of a team under actual operational conditions. That's where we'll find out if you really belong here. Sarah nodded her understanding. When do I meet my team? Williams checked his watch. Tomorrow morning. You'll be assigned to Team 7 under Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez. They're a solid group with extensive deployment experience. Rodriguez is a good leader who'll give you a fair chance to prove yourself. The remainder of the day was spent on administrative details and equipment assignments. Sarah received her team-specific gear and learned about the unit's standard operating procedures. Everything was documented carefully, with signatures required at each step of the process. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters to prepare for the next phase of her integration. She reviewed the personnel files of her new teammates, studying their backgrounds and specializations. Understanding the people she would work with was just as important as understanding the missions they might face. Chief Rodriguez had an impressive service record, with multiple deployments and a reputation for bringing his people home safely. The other team members were equally experienced, each with specialized skills that contributed to the team's overall capabilities. Sarah spent time organizing her gear and reviewing tactical procedures that might be relevant to her new assignment. She wanted to be ready for whatever challenges Team 7 might present. First impressions would be important in establishing her credibility with the group. Sleep came after careful preparation for the next day. Sarah had learned to rest when possible while maintaining mental readiness for action. Tomorrow would bring new teammates, new challenges, and new opportunities to demonstrate her value as an operator. The morning alarm found Sarah already awake and mentally rehearsing the day ahead. She completed her morning routine with military precision, ensuring her appearance and equipment were flawless. First meetings with new team members required attention to every detail. The Team 7 briefing room was located in a secure section of the administrative complex. Sarah arrived a few minutes early to familiarize herself with the layout and equipment. The room contained sophisticated communication gear, computer systems, and wall-mounted displays for mission planning. Chief Rodriguez entered precisely on time, followed by the other team members. Sarah stood and waited to be introduced, studying the group that would become her professional family for the foreseeable future. Rodriguez was a man in his early 40s with the kind of calm presence that inspired confidence in subordinates and superiors alike. His introduction was brief and professional, focusing on Sarah's qualifications rather than the historical significance of her assignment. The other team members were introduced in order of seniority. Petty Officer First Class Thompson was the team's communications specialist, responsible for maintaining contact with headquarters during operations. Petty Officer Second Class Davis handled explosive ordnance and demolition tasks. Petty Officer Second Class Kim specialized in intelligence gathering and analysis. "Welcome to Team 7, Rodriguez said after the introductions were complete. "We've got a training exercise scheduled for this afternoon. It'll give everyone a chance to see how we work together." Sarah nodded. "I'm ready, Chief. What's the scenario?" Rodriguez smiled slightly. "We'll brief it later. First, let's talk about how this team operates and what we expect from each member." The conversation that followed was both informative and reassuring. Rodriguez outlined the team's approach to missions, emphasizing communication, flexibility, and mutual support. Each member had specific responsibilities, but everyone was expected to back up their teammates when necessary. Sarah asked relevant questions about procedures and protocols, showing her interest in understanding how the team functioned. Her questions demonstrated both tactical knowledge and consideration for how her integration might affect existing relationships within the group. Thompson, the communications specialist, seemed particularly interested in Sarah's technical background. I saw in your file that you scored high on electronics and communications during training. That could be useful if we need backup support in those areas. I'd be happy to help however I can, Sarah replied. My goal is to add value to the team's capabilities, not disrupt what's already working. Davis, the demolitions expert, was more direct in his approach. What we need to know is whether you can handle the pressure when things go wrong. Training scores are one thing. Real operations are something else entirely. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I understand completely. The only way to prove that is through actual performance. I'm ready when you are. Kim, the intelligence specialist, had been quietly observing the interaction. The scenarios we train on are designed to replicate real-world conditions as closely as possible. You'll get your chance to show what you can do. Rodriguez watched the exchange with approval. His team was asking the right questions, and Sarah was giving appropriate answers. The integration process was off to a good start, though he knew real acceptance would come only through shared experiences under pressure. All right, people, Rodriguez said. Let's get ready for this afternoon's exercise. Sarah, you'll be taking point on the initial reconnaissance phase. Thompson will provide communication support. Davis and Kim will handle backup and extraction planning. Sarah felt a surge of satisfaction at being given a leadership role in her first team exercise. Rodriguez was clearly testing her ability to function under scrutiny while giving her teammates a chance to evaluate her decision-making skills. The training exercise would be more than just another assessment. It would be Sarah's introduction to the real world of elite military operations, where success depended not just on individual skills, but on the ability to function as part of a cohesive unit. She was ready for the challenge. The training exercise began at 1,400 hours with a mission briefing that felt as realistic as any operational planning session. Rodriguez stood before a large display showing satellite imagery of a mock compound built specifically for training purposes. The level of detail was impressive, with buildings, obstacles, and defensive positions that would challenge even experienced teams. Intelligence indicates a high-value target is being held in Building Alpha, Rodriguez explained, using a laser pointer to highlight key features of the compound. Our mission is to extract the target while minimizing collateral damage and avoiding detection by hostile forces. Sarah studied the imagery carefully, noting potential approach routes and areas where the team might encounter difficulties. The compound was designed to present multiple challenges simultaneously: restricted sight lines, defensive choke points, and time-sensitive decision requirements. Rules of engagement are standard, Rodriguez continued. Training weapons only, but all safety protocols remain in effect. Exercise controllers will be monitoring our performance and providing immediate feedback on tactical decisions. Thompson reviewed the communication protocols while Davis outlined the explosive charges that might be needed to breach defensive barriers. Kim presented intelligence estimates of enemy strength and positioning. Each team member contributed specialized knowledge to the overall mission plan. Sarah, you'll lead the initial reconnaissance, Rodriguez said. We need eyes on the compound before we commit to any specific approach. Take your time and gather all the information we need for final planning. Sarah nodded and began preparing her equipment. Night vision devices, communications gear, observation tools, and recording equipment went into her pack with practiced efficiency. Every item had been checked and double-checked during the preparation phase. The approach to the training compound took Sarah through varied terrain that simulated real-world operational environments. She moved carefully through wooded areas, across open ground, and around artificial obstacles designed to test her fieldcraft skills. Exercise controllers watched from concealed positions, evaluating her technique and decision-making. Reaching the observation point without detection required patience and careful route selection. Sarah took advantage of natural cover and timing to position herself where she could observe the compound without exposing her location to simulated defenders. The process took longer than a direct approach would have, but stealth was more important than speed in this phase. From her concealed position, Sarah began systematically studying the compound layout and defensive arrangements. Training personnel moved through the area in patterns that simulated guard rotations and security patrols. She documented everything she observed, building a comprehensive picture of the challenges her team would face. The simulated defenders were well-trained and followed realistic security procedures. Their patrol patterns showed both regularity and random variation, making timing predictions difficult but not impossible. Sarah identified several potential weaknesses in their coverage that could be exploited during the actual assault phase. Communication with her team was maintained through encrypted radio transmissions that wouldn't compromise her position. Thompson coordinated the information flow while Rodriguez made tactical decisions based on Sarah's reports. The process felt natural and professional, with each team member contributing their expertise to the developing plan. After 2 hours of observation, Sarah had gathered enough information for detailed mission planning. She documented guard positions, timing patterns, structural vulnerabilities, and potential escape routes. The intelligence would allow her team to approach the compound with confidence and specific objectives. "Excellent work," Rodriguez said when Sarah returned from her reconnaissance mission. "Your intelligence reports give us everything we need for tactical planning. Now let's see how well we can execute." The assault phase began at sunset, with Sarah and her teammates moving through the same terrain she had covered earlier. The difference was that now they moved as a coordinated unit, each member responsible for specific tasks while maintaining awareness of the overall mission objective. Sarah found herself naturally falling into the rhythm of team operations. Her reconnaissance work had given her detailed knowledge of the compound, making her an invaluable resource for real-time decision-making. When the team encountered unexpected obstacles, her familiarity with the area allowed for quick adaptation. The first challenge came at the compound perimeter, where simulated sensors required careful bypassing to avoid triggering alarms. Davis used his technical expertise to defeat the electronic systems, while Sarah provided security overwatch. The process required precise timing and complete trust in each other's abilities. Breaching the outer defensive barrier required coordination between multiple team members. Thompson maintained communication with exercise controllers while Kim monitored for changes in the simulated threat environment. Sarah and Davis worked together to create an entry point that wouldn't compromise the team's stealth approach. Inside the compound, the team moved with practiced efficiency through corridors and rooms that could have concealed hostile forces. Sarah's reconnaissance intelligence proved accurate as they navigated toward the building containing their target. Every movement was deliberate and coordinated. The target building presented its own challenges, with multiple levels and numerous rooms where defenders might be positioned. The team split into pairs to clear the structure systematically, maintaining communication and mutual support throughout the process. Sarah found herself partnered with Thompson for the building clearing operation. Their different specializations complemented each other well, with Sarah's tactical skills supporting Thompson's technical capabilities. They moved through the building with confidence and efficiency. The simulated target was located on the second floor, guarded by training personnel who represented hostile forces. Reaching the target required neutralizing the guards without alerting other defenders in the area. Sarah and Thompson approached the challenge with careful planning and precise execution. The engagement itself lasted only seconds, with both simulated guards neutralized before they could raise an alarm. Sarah's marksmanship training proved valuable as she engaged targets accurately while Thompson secured the extraction route. The coordination was seamless and professional. Extracting the simulated target from the compound required the same level of coordination that had brought them to this point. The team moved as a unit, covering each other's movements while maintaining awareness of potential threats. Sarah's knowledge of escape routes proved invaluable during this phase. Exercise controllers monitored the entire operation, providing immediate feedback on tactical decisions and execution. Their evaluation would determine not only Sarah's individual performance, but also how well she integrated with the team's existing dynamics. The exercise concluded successfully with the team and their simulated target safely clear of the compound. Rodriguez called for immediate after-action review to discuss what had worked well and where improvements might be needed. Outstanding performance across the board, Rodriguez began. Sarah, your reconnaissance work was thorough and accurate. The intelligence you gathered allowed us to plan effectively and execute without major complications. Thompson nodded agreement. The communication protocols worked well. Having someone with detailed knowledge of the terrain made coordination much easier during the execution phase. Davis was characteristically direct in his assessment. Good work under pressure. You handled the unexpected obstacles without losing focus on the primary mission. That's what we need in real operations. Kim had been taking notes throughout the exercise. The timing estimates from the reconnaissance phase were accurate within acceptable margins. That level of precision is critical for mission success. Sarah listened to the feedback with professional interest, noting areas where she might improve her performance in future exercises. The team's acceptance seemed genuine, based on demonstrated competence rather than courtesy. Next week we'll run a more complex scenario, Rodriguez announced. Multiple objectives, time constraints, and equipment failures. It'll give everyone a better sense of how we perform when everything doesn't go according to plan. The team spent another hour reviewing video footage from the exercise and discussing tactical alternatives. Sarah participated actively in the conversation, offering insights from her reconnaissance work while asking questions about techniques used by her more experienced teammates. That evening, Sarah returned to her quarters with a sense of accomplishment tempered by awareness that this was only the beginning. One successful exercise didn't guarantee acceptance or long-term success with the team. Consistent performance over time would be required to establish her credibility. The following days brought additional training exercises of increasing complexity. Sarah found herself taking on more challenging roles as Rodriguez tested her capabilities and leadership potential. Each exercise provided opportunities to learn from her teammates while contributing her own specialized skills. Working with Team 7 felt natural in ways that Sarah hadn't expected. The group's focus on mission accomplishment created an environment where competence mattered more than background or demographics. Her gender became irrelevant when lives depended on professional performance. Rodriguez proved to be an exceptional leader who brought out the best in each team member while maintaining focus on collective objectives. His guidance helped Sarah understand not just what to do, but why specific approaches worked better than others in various situations. Thompson's technical expertise complemented Sarah's tactical knowledge in ways that improved both their individual capabilities and the team's overall effectiveness. Their partnership during exercises demonstrated the kind of professional relationship that made elite units successful. Davis initially maintained some skepticism about Sarah's capabilities, but his attitude shifted as her consistent performance proved her competence. His direct communication style actually made it easier for Sarah to understand exactly what was expected from her. Kim's analytical approach to problems provided Sarah with insights into intelligence gathering and threat assessment that enhanced her own tactical decision-making. The combination of different specializations created a team capability greater than the sum of individual skills. 3 weeks into her assignment with Team 7, Sarah felt confident that she was becoming a valued team member rather than simply an addition to the unit. Her performance during exercises had been consistently strong, and her teammates seemed to trust her judgment in tactical situations. The base itself had also become more comfortable as Sarah established routines and relationships beyond her immediate team. Other personnel had grown accustomed to her presence, and the initial curiosity about the female SEAL had given way to professional acceptance based on observed competence. Sarah's reputation was spreading throughout the base community. Instructors mentioned her performance during training exercises, and other teams began requesting her participation in joint operations. Word of mouth in military units traveled quickly, and Sarah's name was becoming associated with professional excellence. Despite her growing acceptance, Sarah remained aware that real challenges lay ahead. Training exercises, no matter how realistic, couldn't fully replicate the stress and danger of actual combat operations. Her ultimate test would come when Team 7 deployed on actual missions. The possibility of deployment was never far from anyone's mind. Operational units like Team 7 existed to respond to real-world crises, and their training was designed to prepare them for missions that could come with little warning. Sarah wanted to be ready when that call came. Rodriguez had mentioned that Team 7 was due for rotation into an active deployment cycle within the next few months. The prospect of real operations excited Sarah, while also focusing her attention on areas where she might need additional preparation. Evening training sessions became a regular part of Sarah's routine as she worked to master skills that might prove critical during deployment. Physical conditioning, weapons proficiency, and tactical procedures all received attention during her personal training time. Her teammates had begun including Sarah in informal discussions about tactics, equipment, and lessons learned from previous deployments. These conversations provided insights that couldn't be gained through formal training, sharing the kind of practical knowledge that distinguished experienced operators. The integration process was succeeding beyond Sarah's initial expectations. She had proven her individual capabilities and demonstrated her value as a team member. More importantly, she had earned the respect and trust of people whose opinions mattered in the special operations community. Looking ahead, Sarah could see challenges that would test everything she had learned and accomplished. Real operations would require not just technical competence, but also the kind of judgment and leadership that developed only through experience under pressure. She was ready to face those challenges when they came. The foundation had been laid for a successful career as a SEAL operator. Sarah had proven she belonged among the elite warriors who comprised her new unit. Now she needed to continue building on that foundation through consistent performance and continuous improvement. 6 months had passed since Sarah's arrival at the base, and her integration with Team 7 had progressed beyond everyone's expectations. She had participated in dozens of training exercises, each more complex than the last, and had proven herself capable of handling whatever challenges came her way. Her teammates now relied on her expertise as naturally as they did their own specializations. The call for deployment came on a Tuesday morning during routine training operations. Rodriguez received notification that Team 7 was being activated for immediate deployment to support ongoing operations in a classified location. The mission briefing would follow within hours, with departure scheduled for the next day. Sarah felt the familiar mixture of excitement and focused intensity that came with real operational tasking. All the training and preparation had been leading to this moment. She would finally have the opportunity to prove herself in actual combat conditions rather than training scenarios. The mission briefing took place in a secure facility normally used only for classified operations. Sarah and her teammates were joined by intelligence officers, mission planners, and support personnel who would coordinate their deployment. The level of security and preparation indicated the importance of their assignment. Operation Seahawk involves the recovery of sensitive intelligence from a hostile environment. The briefing officer began. Recent satellite imagery confirms the location of materials vital to national security interests. Team 7 will conduct the recovery operation with minimal support and strict time constraints. Sarah studied the intelligence materials with professional interest. The target location was a compound in mountainous terrain that would challenge every aspect of their training. Weather conditions, hostile forces, and limited extraction options would make this a demanding mission even for experienced operators. The intelligence package included detailed maps, photographs, and analysis of enemy capabilities in the target area. Sarah noticed several factors that would complicate the mission: restricted approach routes, well-defended positions, and the possibility of reinforcements arriving during the operation. Rodriguez asked detailed questions about enemy strength, weather forecasts, and available support assets. His experience with similar operations was evident in the specificity of his inquiries and his focus on factors that could affect mission success. Thompson reviewed communication protocols and equipment requirements for operating in the target environment. The mountainous terrain would create challenges for maintaining contact with headquarters, requiring backup systems and contingency procedures. Davis studied the intelligence on enemy defensive positions and potential targets for explosive breaching. His expertise would be critical for gaining access to the intelligence materials while avoiding detection by hostile forces. Kim analyzed threat assessments and escape route options based on current intelligence estimates. Her work would help the team avoid enemy patrols and reach extraction points safely after completing the primary mission. Sarah found herself focusing on the tactical challenges of approaching and infiltrating the target compound. Her reconnaissance skills would be essential for gathering real-time intelligence and identifying opportunities for successful mission execution. The briefing concluded with specific assignments for each team member and timelines for mission phases. Sarah would lead the advanced reconnaissance while her teammates prepared for the assault and extraction phases. The plan was comprehensive but flexible enough to allow for adjustments based on conditions encountered during the operation. Equipment preparation took most of the remaining day, with each team member selecting gear appropriate for their specific mission requirements. Sarah chose items that would support her reconnaissance role while providing backup capability for the overall mission. Personal weapons, night vision equipment, communication devices, and specialized tools went into carefully organized packs that balanced mission requirements with weight limitations. Every item was tested and verified before being secured for deployment. Sarah spent time reviewing maps and intelligence materials until she could navigate the target area from memory. Understanding terrain features, elevation changes, and potential hazards would be critical for successful reconnaissance in unfamiliar territory. The evening before departure provided an opportunity for final preparations and mental readiness. Sarah completed her personal equipment checks and reviewed contingency procedures that might be needed if the mission didn't proceed according to plan. Sleep came easily despite the anticipation of the upcoming operation. Sarah had learned to rest when opportunities presented themselves, knowing that operational missions often involved extended periods without adequate sleep or recovery time. The departure process began before dawn with final equipment checks and transportation to the deployment airfield. Sarah and her teammates moved through familiar routines that had been practiced countless times during training exercises. The aircraft that would carry them to the operational area was configured for military transport, with minimal amenities but maximum cargo capacity. Sarah settled in for the long flight, using the time to review mission materials and maintain mental readiness. During the flight, Rodriguez conducted final briefings on weather conditions, intelligence updates, and coordination procedures with other units operating in the area. The information helped refine their tactical approach based on the most current available data. Sarah used the flight time to study terrain maps and satellite imagery of the target area. Memorizing key features and potential landmarks would help her navigate effectively during the reconnaissance phase of the operation. Landing at the forward operating base brought Sarah into contact with the operational environment where her mission would take place. The base was austere but functional, with facilities designed to support combat operations rather than provide comfort. Briefings with local commanders provided additional intelligence on current conditions in the target area. Recent enemy activity, weather patterns, and friendly force locations all influenced the final tactical plan for Operation Seahawk. Equipment and communications checks confirmed that all systems were functioning properly in the operational environment. Sarah verified that her specialized reconnaissance gear was working correctly and that backup systems were available if needed. The final mission briefing took place in a secure tent where last-minute intelligence updates could be incorporated into the operational plan. Sarah listened carefully to reports of enemy patrol patterns and recent changes in defensive positions. Team 7 would insert into the operational area by helicopter during early morning hours when enemy activity was typically at its lowest level. The insertion point was several kilometers from the target compound, requiring an approach march through difficult terrain. Sarah would separate from the main team after insertion to conduct detailed reconnaissance of the target area. Her observations would provide real-time intelligence for the assault phase while identifying potential complications not apparent in satellite imagery. The helicopter insertion went smoothly despite challenging weather conditions that limited visibility and created turbulence during the approach to the landing zone. Sarah and her teammates exited the aircraft quickly and moved to concealed positions while the helicopter departed. Moving through the mountainous terrain toward the target area required careful navigation and constant awareness of potential enemy presence. Sarah used night vision equipment to maintain formation with her teammates while avoiding obstacles and hazards. The separation point was reached without incident, allowing Sarah to begin her individual reconnaissance mission while her teammates moved to positions for the assault phase. Radio communication would be maintained through encrypted channels that couldn't be intercepted by enemy forces. Sarah's approach to the target compound required several hours of careful movement through terrain that offered both concealment opportunities and navigation challenges. She avoided established trails and roads that might be monitored by enemy patrols. Reaching her observation position before dawn allowed Sarah to study the compound layout and defensive arrangements in detail. The intelligence materials had been accurate, but real-time observation revealed additional factors that would influence tactical planning. Guard positions, patrol patterns, and defensive obstacles were documented systematically as Sarah built a comprehensive picture of the challenges her team would face. The information was transmitted to Rodriguez through secure communication channels. Enemy forces at the compound appeared to be well-trained and followed professional security procedures. Their defensive positions were well-chosen and mutually supporting, indicating experienced leadership and adequate resources. Sarah identified several vulnerabilities in the defensive arrangement that could be exploited during the assault phase. Timing windows when certain areas were unobserved, structural weaknesses that could facilitate breaching operations, and escape routes that avoided the strongest defensive positions. The intelligence materials were located in a building at the center of the compound, requiring penetration through multiple defensive layers. Sarah's observations would help her team approach the objective while minimizing exposure to enemy fire. Communication with Rodriguez confirmed that the assault would begin after Sarah's reconnaissance was complete and intelligence had been analyzed. The team would approach from the direction Sarah recommended based on her observations of enemy defensive weaknesses. Dawn brought increased activity at the compound as enemy forces conducted routine security procedures and shift changes. Sarah continued her observation while remaining concealed in her carefully chosen position. The compound showed signs of recent improvements to defensive positions, indicating that enemy forces were aware of potential threats and had taken steps to strengthen their security. These changes would need to be factored into the assault plan. Sarah's detailed reporting allowed Rodriguez to refine the tactical approach based on current conditions rather than pre-mission intelligence estimates. The accuracy of her observations would be critical for mission success and team safety. Mid-morning brought the signal for Sarah to begin moving toward the rally point, where she would rejoin her teammates for the assault phase. Her reconnaissance mission had been successful, providing the intelligence needed for final tactical planning. The movement to the rally point required the same careful attention to concealment that had characterized her approach to the observation position. Enemy patrol activity had increased during daylight hours, making detection a constant concern. Rejoining her teammates at the rally point allowed for final coordination before beginning the assault phase of the operation. Sarah's intelligence reports were incorporated into the tactical plan, with specific assignments for each team member. "Excellent work," Rodriguez said after reviewing Sarah's reconnaissance reports. "The intelligence you gathered gives us several options for approaching the objective. Your recommended route looks like our best chance for avoiding enemy detection." Thompson verified that communication systems were functioning properly for the assault phase, while Davis reviewed breaching requirements based on Sarah's observations of defensive barriers. Kim analyzed escape route options and timing estimates for reaching extraction points. The assault began with careful movement toward the compound perimeter using the approach route Sarah had identified during reconnaissance. Her knowledge of enemy positions and timing patterns allowed the team to avoid detection while closing on their objective. Breaching the compound perimeter required precise timing and coordination between team members. Davis employed his specialized skills to defeat defensive barriers while Sarah provided overwatch security for the operation. Moving through the compound toward the target building tested every aspect of the team's training and coordination. Sarah's reconnaissance intelligence proved accurate as they navigated between buildings and avoided enemy positions. The target building was reached without alerting enemy forces to their presence. Sarah's observations had identified the best approach route and optimal timing for gaining access to the structure containing the intelligence materials. Securing the intelligence materials required rapid but methodical searching of the target building. The team worked efficiently while maintaining security and preparing for immediate extraction from the compound. Enemy forces discovered their presence during the final phase of the operation, leading to a brief but intense firefight as Team 7 fought their way out of the compound. Sarah's marksmanship skills proved valuable as she engaged hostile forces while protecting her teammates. The escape from the compound followed routes Sarah had identified during reconnaissance, allowing the team to avoid the strongest enemy positions while moving toward the extraction point. Her tactical knowledge was instrumental in their successful withdrawal. Reaching the extraction point required continued vigilance as enemy forces attempted pursuit. The team's coordination and Sarah's terrain knowledge allowed them to maintain their advantage while moving toward safety. Helicopter extraction was completed successfully despite enemy attempts to interfere with the operation. Team 7 and the recovered intelligence materials were safely removed from the operational area and returned to the forward operating base. The mission debrief confirmed that Operation Seahawk had achieved all primary objectives with minimal complications. Sarah's reconnaissance work was specifically cited as critical to the mission's success, establishing her reputation as a valuable team member under actual combat conditions. 3 months had passed since Operation Seahawk, and Sarah's reputation within the special operations community had grown significantly. Word of her performance during the mission had spread beyond Team 7, earning her respect from commanders and operators throughout the base. She was no longer the untested newcomer, but a proven operator with combat experience. The success of her first deployment had led to additional responsibilities and opportunities that Sarah embraced with characteristic determination. Rodriguez had recommended her for advanced training courses that would expand her capabilities and prepare her for leadership roles within the unit. Life at the base had settled into a comfortable routine of training, preparation, and occasional operational missions. Sarah's teammates had come to rely on her expertise as naturally as they did their own specializations, and their professional relationships had evolved into genuine friendships based on shared experiences and mutual respect. The incident that would change everything began on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday evening in the base dining facility. Sarah had finished her daily training routine and was grabbing a quick dinner before reviewing intelligence reports for an upcoming training exercise. She was carrying her tray from the serving line when she noticed the commotion near the beverage station. A group of sailors from a visiting ship were talking loudly, their conversation becoming increasingly animated as they discussed various topics related to military service and current events. Sarah paid little attention to their discussion as she navigated between tables toward an empty seat. She had learned to tune out conversations that didn't concern her, focusing instead on her own responsibilities and objectives. The dining facility was often crowded and noisy during peak meal times. The collision happened suddenly and without warning. One of the visiting sailors, a sergeant named Wilson, turned abruptly from the beverage station while carrying a full cup of coffee. His movement caught Sarah off guard as she passed behind him, and the hot coffee spilled across the front of her uniform. The coffee was hot enough to be painful, soaking through her uniform shirt and creating an immediate mess that would require attention. Sarah stopped walking and looked down at the spreading stain, assessing the damage to her uniform and considering her options for dealing with the situation. Wilson turned to see what had happened and noticed the coffee stain on Sarah's uniform. Instead of apologizing for the accident or offering assistance, his reaction was immediate and inappropriate. His face showed annoyance rather than concern, as if the collision had been Sarah's fault rather than an unfortunate accident. "Great," Wilson said loudly, his voice carrying across the nearby tables. "Just what I needed today." Sarah looked up at him with surprise, expecting an apology or at least acknowledgement that the collision had been accidental. Instead, she found herself facing a man who seemed more concerned with his own inconvenience than the fact that his coffee had ruined her uniform. "Maybe you should watch where you're going," Wilson continued, his tone becoming more aggressive. "This place is crowded enough without people wandering around without paying attention." Sarah felt a flash of anger at his attitude, but kept her voice level and professional. It was an accident, Sergeant. These things happen in crowded spaces. Wilson's response revealed attitudes that went beyond simple annoyance about spilled coffee. His eyes took in Sarah's uniform and rank insignia, and his expression shifted to something approaching disdain. The situation was clearly escalating beyond what should have been a minor incident. Typical, Wilson muttered, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Some people think they belong everywhere just because they wear the uniform. The implication in his words was unmistakable, and Sarah felt the familiar sensation of being judged not for her actions or capabilities but for characteristics beyond her control. She had encountered such attitudes before, though rarely so blatantly expressed in a military dining facility. Several other sailors at nearby tables had begun paying attention to the confrontation. Sarah was aware of their scrutiny and knew that her response would be observed and discussed throughout the base community. How she handled this situation would reflect not only on herself, but on all women in military service. "I think there might be some misunderstanding here," Sarah said calmly, maintaining professional composure despite her growing anger. "The coffee spill was an accident. There's no need for this to become a bigger issue." Wilson seemed emboldened by the attention from nearby tables rather than embarrassed by his inappropriate behavior. His next words crossed lines that should never be crossed in professional military environments. "Go clean yourself up," Wilson said with obvious contempt. "Maybe while you're at it, you can find somewhere you actually belong instead of taking up space where real warriors need to work." The dining facility had grown noticeably quieter as Wilson's words carried across the room. Sarah was now the center of attention in a way she had never wanted, facing a public challenge to her professional credibility and right to serve alongside her male counterparts. Sarah's training had taught her to remain calm under pressure, but this situation required more than tactical skills or technical knowledge. She was being challenged as both a professional and as a person, and her response would define how others perceived her capability to handle adversity. The rational part of Sarah's mind suggested that walking away would be the appropriate response. Filing a complaint through proper channels would address Wilson's inappropriate behavior without creating a public spectacle that could reflect poorly on her own professional judgment. But another part of Sarah's mind recognized that this moment represented something larger than a single incident in a dining facility. Wilson's attitude reflected broader skepticism about women in combat roles, and backing down from his challenge might be seen as confirmation that she didn't belong among elite warriors. Sarah set her tray down on the nearest table and turned to face Wilson directly. Her movement was deliberate and controlled, drawing the attention of everyone in the immediate area. The choice she was about to make would have consequences that extended far beyond this single confrontation. "Sergeant Wilson," Sarah said clearly, her voice carrying across the now quiet dining facility. "I think you might have the wrong impression about who belongs where." Wilson sensed the challenge in her tone and seemed to welcome the opportunity for confrontation. His posture shifted subtly as he prepared for whatever might come next, apparently confident in his ability to handle a situation he had initiated. "Is that right?" Wilson replied with a smirk. "Maybe you'd like to explain it to me." Sarah's response was swift and decisive, drawing on years of combat training and practical experience in handling threats. Her movement was economical and precise, designed to neutralize Wilson's ability to continue the confrontation while minimizing the risk of serious injury. The takedown happened so quickly that most observers didn't fully understand what they had witnessed until Wilson was lying on the floor looking stunned and confused. Sarah had used his own momentum and positioning against him, applying leverage and technique rather than brute force to achieve her objective. Wilson found himself flat on his back with Sarah's knee positioned precisely where it would discourage any attempt to continue fighting. Her training had taught her exactly how much pressure to apply to control an opponent without causing permanent damage. "Now then," Sarah said quietly, her voice calm despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. "I think we need to clarify a few things about who belongs where." The dining facility had erupted in surprised murmurs and exclamations as Wilson hit the floor. Sarah was dimly aware of chairs scraping and people standing to get better views of what was happening, but her attention remained focused on Wilson and the immediate situation. Wilson's eyes showed shock and embarrassment as he realized the position he found himself in. The confident aggression he had displayed moments earlier had evaporated, replaced by awareness that he had seriously misjudged the capabilities of the person he had chosen to confront. "The truth is," Sarah continued in the same calm voice, "I earned my place here through the same training and standards as every other operator on this base. My qualifications aren't subject to your approval or anyone else's opinion about where women belong." Several base personnel had begun moving toward the scene, including Chief Rodriguez and other members of Team 7 who had witnessed the confrontation from across the dining facility. Sarah was aware of their approach, but maintained her focus on Wilson and the lesson being taught. "Furthermore," Sarah said, applying slight additional pressure to emphasize her point, "questioning someone's right to serve based on their gender rather than their capabilities demonstrates the kind of thinking that has no place in a professional military environment." Wilson attempted to speak, but found Sarah's positioning made conversation difficult. His earlier confidence had completely disappeared, replaced by obvious discomfort and growing awareness that the situation had turned against him in ways he hadn't anticipated. "I think we understand each other now," Sarah concluded, beginning to release the pressure that had kept Wilson immobilized. "Any questions about who belongs where, or can we consider this matter resolved?" Wilson shook his head quickly, apparently eager to end the confrontation that had gone so badly for him. Sarah stood smoothly and stepped back, allowing him to regain his feet while maintaining readiness in case he chose to continue the fight. The sergeant stood slowly, obviously shaken by the experience and aware that everyone in the dining facility was watching his reaction. His uniform was disheveled, and his dignity had taken a severe beating, but he appeared to be physically unharmed by the encounter. Rodriguez reached the scene as Wilson was brushing himself off and attempting to restore some semblance of professional appearance. The chief's expression was unreadable as he surveyed the situation and the crowd of onlookers who had witnessed the confrontation. "Everything under control here?" Rodriguez asked, his question directed primarily at Sarah but encompassing the broader situation that had developed in the dining facility. Sarah nodded calmly. "Yes, Chief. Sergeant Wilson and I were just clarifying some misconceptions about qualifications and appropriate behavior. I think we've reached an understanding." Wilson looked around the dining facility at the faces watching him and seemed to realize that pursuing the matter further would only compound his embarrassment. His aggression had been met with superior skill and controlled force, leaving him with no good options for salvaging his pride. "No problem here," Wilson muttered, avoiding eye contact with Sarah or anyone else in the immediate area. "Just a misunderstanding that got out of hand." Rodriguez studied both participants for a moment before nodding acceptance of their explanation. His experience with military personnel gave him insight into what had really happened, but the situation appeared to have been resolved without serious incident or injury. "Outstanding," Rodriguez said. "In that case, I suggest everyone return to their meals and normal activities. Show's over, people." The crowd began dispersing as conversations resumed throughout the dining facility. Sarah noticed that the discussion seemed more animated than usual, with frequent glances in her direction as people processed what they had witnessed. Wilson gathered his belongings and left the dining facility quickly, apparently eager to escape the attention his confrontation had generated. Sarah watched him go with satisfaction at having addressed his inappropriate behavior while demonstrating her capabilities to anyone who had doubted them. Thompson approached Sarah with obvious approval in his expression. "Nice work," he said quietly. "That guy needed an attitude adjustment, and you provided it without making a bigger mess than necessary." Davis nodded agreement. "Smooth takedown. You controlled the situation without letting it escalate beyond what was required to make your point." Kim had been taking notes in her ever-present notebook. "Word of this is going to spread throughout the base community. Should help establish your reputation with people who still had questions about your capabilities." Sarah felt a mixture of satisfaction and concern about the incident and its aftermath. She had successfully defended herself and her right to serve, but the confrontation might also attract unwanted attention from senior commanders who preferred to avoid such incidents. Rodriguez seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't worry about official fallout," he said. "Wilson initiated the confrontation, and you responded appropriately. Self-defense training is part of every operator's qualification, and you demonstrated yours effectively. The remainder of the evening passed without further incident, though Sarah noticed increased attention from other base personnel who had heard about the confrontation. Some approached her directly to express approval, while others simply nodded respectfully as she passed. Later that evening, Sarah returned to her quarters to reflect on the day's events and their potential consequences. The confrontation with Wilson had been resolved successfully, but it represented ongoing challenges she would face throughout her military career. The incident had also demonstrated that her integration into the special operations community was more complete than she had realized. Her teammates had supported her without question, treating the confrontation as an attack on one of their own rather than a separate issue involving gender discrimination. Word of the incident spread throughout the base overnight, with various versions of the story circulating among different units and communities. Sarah's handling of Wilson's challenge became the subject of widespread discussion and generally positive commentary. The next morning brought a request for Sarah to report to Lieutenant Commander Morrison's office. She expected this meeting and had prepared to discuss the previous evening's events and any official response that might be required. Morrison was reviewing paperwork when Sarah entered his office, but his expression suggested approval rather than concern about the incident. He gestured for her to sit while he finished reading what appeared to be incident reports from multiple sources. Interesting evening, Morrison began. I've received several reports about what happened in the dining facility. Care to give me your perspective on the events? Sarah provided a factual account of the confrontation, focusing on Wilson's inappropriate behavior and her response to his challenge. She emphasized her attempt to defuse the situation peacefully before resorting to physical action. Morrison listened without comment until Sarah finished her account. His questions focused on her decision-making process and whether she felt her response had been proportional to the threat presented by Wilson's behavior. Your teammates speak very highly of your handling of the situation, Morrison said. They seem to feel you demonstrated both restraint and capability in dealing with someone who was clearly out of line. Sarah nodded. I tried to resolve it peacefully first, sir. When that didn't work, I used the minimum force necessary to end the confrontation and make it clear that such behavior was unacceptable. Morrison smiled slightly. From what I understand, your message was received loud and clear. I doubt Sergeant Wilson will repeat his mistake, and other personnel who might harbor similar attitudes have been given something to think about. The meeting concluded with Morrison's expression of support for Sarah's actions and confidence in her continued service with Team 7. No official action would be taken regarding the incident, which was being treated as a resolved matter between military personnel. Walking back to her quarters after the meeting, Sarah realized that the confrontation with Wilson had marked another milestone in her military career. She had successfully defended herself and her right to serve while demonstrating her capabilities to anyone who had questioned them. The incident would become part of her reputation within the special operations community, serving as evidence that she could handle not only the physical demands of elite military service, but also the social challenges that came with being a pioneer in her field. Sarah's integration into Team 7 and the broader base community was now complete in ways that went beyond successful training exercises or operational missions. She had proven herself capable of standing up for her principles while maintaining the professionalism expected of elite military personnel. The future would undoubtedly bring new challenges and opportunities for Sarah to demonstrate her capabilities and contributions to military operations. But the foundation had been firmly established through consistent performance and the courage to defend her place among the nation's most elite warriors.